of what is next. Our next speaker represents an organization that powers some of the most advanced AI breakthroughs on the planet, across industries, devices, and borders. From infrastructure to intelligence, NVIDIA sits at the center of global AI innovation. We're honored to welcome on stage Mr. Vishal Dhupar, Managing Director, South Asia at NVIDIA, to share his insights on the AI revolution, the India opportunity. Let's give him a huge round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Come on, louder.
Do the slides come up here? I say. All right, I think what a wonderful day this has been. You know, firstly, when you think about nation, when you think about a company that's involved with building the nation, genuinely, to me at least, gives goosebumps. We are all here today thanks to SNS, L&T, 80 years of building the nation. And more importantly, building an infrastructure for next one. And I stand before you to talk about industrialization of AI. Peter did a fabulous job. He said the primer. But I'm not going to indulge in that. I'm going to talk to you about industrialization of AI. What does it really mean? Where are we going? And most importantly, who's responsible? Now, everybody who's sitting on the first row, all the way towards me, are not responsible. Everybody who just laughed are responsible. Right? And it is absolutely important that each one of us get this perspective. And what I'm going to do for you is that I'm very quickly, I can't see the slides, so I'm just assuming that you can see, okay, that's right here. All right, so you can see this story, and this is a journey. This is a journey that I'll undertake you for about 25 minutes. We'll try and get the perspectives going, and hopefully you're able to resonate with this. Just a year before my birth, little more than 60 years earlier, the word got coined called modern computing, thanks to IBM S360. It wasn't as if computers were not there before 64, but in 64, introduction of IBM S360 actually did something really unique. Firstly, it worked on a CPU. Secondly, it abstracted the software layer from the hardware layer. For what? For software. Why? So that the software could maintain its precious value right through its journey. Architectures changed. You got into the era of mini computers. You got into client servers. You got into personal computers. And you got into smartphones that you hold, but the architecture never changed. The architecture never changed because there was a silent subsidy that continued to drive and power this architecture. If you ask the computer industry, they'll say Moore's Law. If you ask the CFOs, they'll say, very nice. I can now predict my budget. I know exactly this is where it needs to go. Why do we need to change? And this is how it works. Look at the second block here, which is the third block from the top. Somewhere around 2005, 2006, the data starts jumping up. There's personal computer, there's internet, you're talking on social media, you got mobile phones, you got e-commerce happening, you got UPI transactions taking place. All that data starts coming in, and it's just exponentially growing. And yet, this engine, called the general purpose compute, powered on CPU stalls. It no more can really do what it was able to do before. That whole multiplier that 2 years, I'll double the performance at the same cost, we call it deflation, won't work any longer. And yet, you had scores and scores of data with you. You wanted to make sense out of you, and you couldn't really do. And here was a contrarian company 30 years prior to this who was thinking about, if general purpose compute is very good at everything, it must not be good at something. And that was the introduction of CUDA. Because originally, this contrarian company wanted to bring pixels on the screen and yet realize the power of parallel computing and introduce a concept called CUDA. Why was CUDA introduced? So that the numerical values, people who work in science, people who use programs could now talk to the language of graphics. And who took advantage of it? AlexNet. In 2012, there was big bang of AI, the renewal of AI. We solved the world's longest standing problem, the problem of perception, so that computer could see and understand. And prior to this, in the ImageNet competition, for years people would come as experts and recognize images. They couldn't. The best they did was a year prior to that, which was 61%. These were experts, and yet non-domain experts decided to participate in this competition in 2012. They worked on it for 2 weeks, presented the algorithm. It crushed the ImageNet competition, not by 1%, 2%, 4%, by 40 percentage points. What was the reasoning behind it? What was the learning here? That now we could teach computers. We could teach computers to write software that no human could do. And that was the birth of solving problems not by instructing computers, but by teaching computers. And all of us know this. Each one of us can teach. And that's why 2012 was called the Big Bang of AI. However, underlying that architecture was the compute architecture called the general purpose compute, which was only used to instructions. And it worked in a particular fashion. And if you were a reasoning person, you realized that's not the compute that will work here. It had to be reworked. It had to be rephrased. And that's the enigma that universe normally faces, because you are moving in such a fast pace. There's a new knowledge. There's a new idea. How do you solve it? It's a chicken and egg problem. Who's going to solve it? Now, if you are seeing the future, somebody has to take onus. And we rephrase an entire computer, even though technically we were a technology company. We didn't build computers. We enabled computers. But for somebody to do it, we built a brand new computer that was called DGX. It was shared for our engineers along with some of the leading AI experts. And that changed the whole schema, how the computing worked, and what we came to an understanding that when you go to the world of prediction, and you saw that, you saw SNS putting his palm, then Swati came, she made us clap because we could predict. All that prediction started really happening because the compute changed. The more compute was there, more data was there, more predictable it was there because you understood what was the underlying relationships. You could now understand the pattern. That's why, ladies and gentlemen, you're going through a profound change in computing, and we'll talk a little bit more about it. So the lesson here on this slide is the old engine of general purpose compute is literally dead. The new compute engine is in play. It's called accelerated compute. Now, the big question is that, all right, infrastructure is great, but you spoke about software. Software is very precious. And therefore, what's happening in the world of software? Many of you know that the software was always written in sequence. If this, then what? And think about the underwriter who would ask people to write the software. He would go and say, we should give loans to people, but if their score in CIBIL is less than 650, flag it off. And by the way, don't even approve it if they have defaulted in last 12 months twice. Now, the software was great because for 60 years it worked, its value went up, but suddenly, every time something changed, it would break. It could be a seasonal thing. It could be there was a new way of doing things. It was so brittle, and it only worked on enormous amount of compute that we could only do what somebody asked a question on deterministic. It was very instruction-led. And the person who understood or gave instruction needed to understand every single environment and should know what it was. Now, this ran on the old engine and it was powered by CPUs. The new engine, you feed the data. You show them lots of images. And that's why all the applications that you saw, CLEPOPS, Nostradamus, are all built on showing the computer pictures and images of hundreds of years of loans that you have given. You are showing to it that there is a farmer somewhere there who only buys seeds based on the seasonal requirement, is very consistent. CIBIL score is low, but let's go ahead and give him loan because he repays. You also look at a construction worker that, hey, he uses a mobile phone, he's been going to the same construction site for 6 months, you have an input from the satellite. Now you say this person pays because you can look at his UPI inputs. Talking about UPI, think about this. 2016, 915 transactions in a month. How many are we talking today? 12 million. Not 10x increase, not 100x increase. 13 million x increase. What do you do with that data? How are you going to write instructions to deal with that data? You really need to teach the computer to write the software on its own, and that power runs on GPUs. And that's why you are in a divergent world where you moved from general purpose compute to accelerated compute, and that's why so much compute is either getting replaced or being built up. SNS spoke to you about what OpenAI said. They're not investing alone on their application. That's the need. And now extrapolate that, how much of computing requirement is in play. So now we've understood that the old compute, the old engine is expired, new engine is in play. We write the software differently. Let's look very quickly, what is the physics that is going behind it? I see on the first bench a lot of people who take decisions. I know my industry in particular loves using jargons. We'll use words like LLM. We'll use words like parameters. We'll use words like, oh, now you can use SLMs. Forget that noise. Let's pay a little attention to these 3 scaling laws. There was one scaling law for CPUs, and it lived for 60 years. It was called Moore's law. Now there are 3 scaling laws. Think about the compounding impact that they have. The first scaling law everybody knows, and that's why OpenAI is investing $1.7 trillion. That's the pre-training law. That means you're taking the world's knowledge and cramping that knowledge into people, exactly the way you went to school, exactly the way you went to the college. Even the brightest minds, you collected knowledge, and the smarter and the brighter you were, the more input you got, and you got ready. And this was your raw engine. This is what you forged. Brilliant, bright. Question is, what should you do? Should you expense or should you rent? Because the capital expense here is enormous. But maybe there's a unique reason behind why you should do it. Then you expense capital money. If you feel that you can partner with somebody, then you partner with it through OpEx. And that's why the big tech companies have built that moat, that operating system, which is called the foundational model. They want you to come from there. But it's as good. It's as good as you hiring a brand new graduate, brilliant person, but has to learn what L&T does. 80 years that L&T has been working on it. How do you bring them to that same speed? How do you learn infrastructure business? How do you build it? You got to get the soul going. That's called the pre-training. You got to now take that interactions you've had with the end market. You got to infuse that. You got to learn about it, and you got to make that work. And that's how that graduate will be a specialty person for L&T. And what you will do is that uniqueness. No competitor of L&T can then really say, oh, I also can do this. Think about if one company for training did so much, and you have to uniquely now do to build yours what you require. When you multiply that with enterprises, that's the infrastructure that you require. Now, you got a really specialized person ready to get on to the work, and the third angle comes into play. Remember the time that when ChatGPT came in, you asked a question, it answered instantly, and everybody started saying, oh my God, now you hallucinate, you are so biased, why should I use you? And what did the next thing the technology did? It started making it think. How? Like humans. Like you and I think. Now, I see the lady, she's looking at me, she's almost anticipating what my next statement is because I can see. My experience tells me what she's thinking about. She wants to know what am I going to speak next. It's exactly the same thing the engine starts doing. Now, if you have a simple question, hey, what's his credit score in CIBIL? Instant answer, put the least amount of compute, you get it. But no, I need to afford an infrastructure that's going to be built on GPUs, which has to have a contract, and I have to go to a bank, and the banker is saying, I've never heard about this story. I don't know what GPU is. I don't know what this contract is about. And you're saying, how can I get a contract without an infrastructure? How should I go about it? Okay, let me go and ask my own intelligence, my own co-pilot. And he says, okay, let's think about it, how to sell this idea. Maybe we're going to get one contract. Maybe we need to extrapolate that contract. Maybe we need to explain this to the people. And let's go and then approach it just like humans do. It's able to break down those problems. We call it the pedal. Just like in an automotive, there's a pedal and an engine. You press the pedal minimum when you need to go slow. Give an instant answer, work is done. You press the accelerator fully, you use more compute. And you do it to solve larger problems. And that's why these three things are working in orchestration. That's the compounding impact. And that's why you're getting really close to human intelligence. Now, many of you will ask that this is great. So I understand the engine is old. There's a new engine called accelerated compute. The software is changed. What does it really mean? Does it cost me a lot of money? On the left is what you will see in a data center. Probably any data center you see, I just picked a few racks. I put it as 960 servers of CPU. They consume your entire data center. I replaced them with just 2 computers. First question is, what was the price there? How much is this lower? 25 times lower. Then I look at it, where am I constrained? By reducing the footprint and paying less, did I regain power? On the left side that you are seeing, it consumes power at X. Of that X, this only consumes 1%. So if you were consuming 100 megawatts, now you're only consuming 1.2 megawatts. You reclaim 98 megawatts. And that's the TCO of this. So it's no more about speed. It's about speed and at performance at per watt. Because your constraint, your bottleneck is power. It's nothing else. And if power is what you need to deliver, how do you really deliver it? And it all happens if you use a single fabric. So we come down to the main point. So what are we all building? We build data centers. No, sir. You're building AI factories. Why aren't you building data centers? Because data centers was a warehouse. You used to keep your information and retrieve it when you want. In factories, you put a raw material, you power it on, and you get an end product. What is that end product? Called intelligence. What is the token of that? It's called token. The unit of intelligence is called token. It has value. It's your end product. It's that value that you then trade, either for your workflows or for your transformative things. You build based on how it works. Think about India for a second here. Think about India, where we have our own sovereignty in play. We have our own data, our own algorithms, our own sensibilities, and we work on it. We got the scale. We got our own scale, 1.4 billion people, 22 official languages. We know what does that model look like. If these are the two components that we have, where do you go? Do you go for this data to a refinery outside the country and re-import it at an expensive price and in turn improve somebody else's processes, or do you do it yourself? So do you want to pay more money? I don't know Middle East ever built refineries outside their own country and said, I have all the oil, but the refinery should be outside. How can we do that? If data is your fuel, if data is yours, if sovereign needs are yours, then how do you build this up? And that gets infused as tokens to everything that you do. That's when you figure out that that peasant, that farmer, who would fill 10 pages of application, and after 2 weeks will get to know that, look, my application has been rejected because my CIBIL score was below 650. Now, thanks to AI, which is able to figure out the patterns through multiple images, in 3 seconds can get a loan, and that Cyclops showed you that. Why? As a result of which, what did you end up doing? You brought in 350 million people into the financial gamut. Those 350 million people never existed for any of your competitors. You brought them into play. And that's the AI factory. Any factory is a strategic investment. It requires both investment. It's not an IT project. You got to start from top, and you got to expense money, and you got to figure out your ROI. And very quickly, the nation requires you to do it, and a cluster of that is how it's going to really work. Now, let me give you a quick example. I think Peter touched upon it. Electricity got found. All the candle manufacturers realized that maybe we should use electricity to produce more candles. And they produced more candles till somebody figured out that, hey, you don't need candles for illumination. You require a bulb. And when bulb came in, the business of candles all went out of it. There was a process. You took water, you took energy, you had electrons, you put a process, and out came electricity. You got transformers, and you got industrialized electricity. In 1920s, what did people start doing? They started figuring out, do I want to be in that business? Somebody said, why should I do it now? I should wait. And the other said, okay, we'll see, it's not going to happen in my lifetime. Both the last two went into footnotes. And those who took the action were the headlines. The same thing is happening with intelligence. What do? You take your and my digital experience, which is called the data. You pour that data into electricity. Out comes the token. The token has a process called accelerated compute. It becomes mass production that gets applied, and you got intelligence on your hand. Same question we can ask in 2025 what we asked in 1920. Do we do it now? Should we be emerging now? Shall we wait? Or we should not do? How does this AI factory work? We spoke very quickly about the 3 scaling laws. You decide your strategy, you want to partner, you want to build. You then take your IP, you make the soul of the compute, and then you go into making it operational. That goes into your factory. You start building your prototypes. From those prototypes, you think about the application. And why did the MIT make that report? MIT made that report that 95% of POCs fail. What's happening with POCs? POCs are being worked in a silo. You're not putting the data flywheel there. When you were learning in the POC, you never reinvested on what happened. And it just became that old workload with its efficiency. And Shankar made a statement that, look, I was already doing it. You brought 3 seconds down. How does it make it? Why do I need to invest money? Because you never created the data flywheel there. You never improved the thing, and you never saw the child from crawling to running coming into play. That's why 95% of the people fail. Peter touched upon it, and he worked on it. So this is called AI. I think the slides are moving much faster than I'm pressing them. Look, this is what we bring on the table. We start as a wholesome. You'll find that the electrical work, the plumbing work is on revival. In US, they're not saying that this is AI revival. They're talking about this is a revival of the energy industry. You need to know that science. There's so much of job opportunities there that we got to build up. Our nation is very good at it. We'll bring you the blueprints. How do you build that up? And then we make sure that what you build is not only certified for today, but for next 5 generations, so that you don't have to refurb that. As you move up, the storage systems were built for past. They were all SQL databases. They didn't know how to take advantage. They have to be clubbed together, and that's where it works. Everything from there in green color is available if you want to buy from us or from one of our ecosystem. Each link is optimized. It's not one fabric. It's not one GPU. There are multiple things that are working together. Most importantly, that entire infrastructure is working in synchronization. And with that, you have the operating systems which are available to you. And very importantly on that, you have the blueprints. If you look at the blueprints, it's like your Excel template. It's like your PowerPoint template. You are allowed to build your own PowerPoint. It's different than mine. Yours is very different. You use those blueprints and build, and we add every day. That's what the factory does for you. It's ready to conquer, give you that specialty, and that's how it works. So eventually, what happens to the financial world? Everything starts getting impacted, whether you're in banking, trading, payment. Once I have a transaction, once I understand what's underlying that transaction, I know the payment mechanism. If I know the payment mechanism, I know who I need to go after. If I know who to go after, I don't have to ask a question. I got a strange call the other day. My mom was in the hospital. I get this little call saying that, sorry, we declined because you just spent 3 lakhs. I said, wow. Here is someone who probably pays 3 lakhs at the end of the month because I did single transaction, they're asking me this money. How am I supposed to feel? It's my mother who is in the hospital. And this person has got a rule-based system that because he spends 3 lakhs in a month, how can he spend 3 lakhs on a single transaction? If they had understood that all my phone calls were going from the hospital, if they had known what's really happening at this current moment of time, because hospital charge you this money, and this call is coming from the hospital, they probably would have said, thank you for investing. Can we help you with anything else? You got a medical insurance with us. Should you help you out? I would have been their friend for lifetime. Think about that example. Think about what is really the opportunity together, how much we can do. In interest of time, I'm going to go towards the end. So what did I speak? I said the old way, the way the computing is to run on old engine called the Moore's Law is dead. You now have a new engine called accelerated compute. That's where all the compute is being built. That's why people are saying there's so much of demand for compute, and the supplies are trying to catch up. Number 3, the way we write software has changed. Number 4, we got to think sovereign. We got to think sovereign because it's our data, it's our fuel, belongs to us, and for that we require to build infrastructure. 5, the opportunities are so big, how you think about it is what makes a difference. Don't think like the candle maker. Think like when you invent, like a bulb, you change the life. It's my belief, and I've said it in this very convention, that Indians are very good at adopting. Indians should now become the leaders, because the work that we will do in India will impact many, many countries because we think about small volumes. So I don't know whether that clap was to ask me to go off, but let me do one more thing. I also made a statement here that as a nation, we will be very proud that very soon people are going to connect India to being the intelligence capital. Maybe Mumbai will be the financial intelligence capital. Why? Because of the diversity we have. Because of your ability beyond the first line to adopt and take this responsibility to build this wonderful infrastructure called AI factories in the country. And on that note, thank you very much. Think big, and we are here to help you out.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dhupar, for that high-impact session. Sir, I'm sorry, I know you just sat down, but I would request you to kindly come back on stage. And as you're walking up, I would like to thank you one more time for your perspective on where AI is headed and how it continues to accelerate innovation. I would now like to invite on stage Mr. Raju Doti, Chief Operating Officer at L&T Finance, to the stage to present you with our token of gratitude. Move to the center stage, gentlemen. It's all yours. And now everybody looking at them. Come on, give it up.
What you ended up now doing, I don't know whether they liked my speech or they're going based on your instructions.
Human mind is a curious mind and a very, very independent mind. So they're clapping because they enjoyed your talk.